The passport. The airport was already buzzing long before sunrise. Rolling suitcases, tired faces, hurried footsteps, coffee steam rising in the cold morning air. But in the middle of all that movement, one person walked with a calm, almost regal confidence. Dr. Amara Ellison. She wasn't just another passenger. She was the Chief Federal Aviation Authority Inspector, the youngest, the first woman, and the first black person to ever hold the position. Her badge, when she wore it, could shut down entire airlines, ground fleets, and override CEOs. But today, she wore no badge, just a navy blazer, travel tote, and the kind of quiet power people didn't recognize until it was too late. Her flight was simple: Washington, D.C. to San Francisco, a conference, a keynote speech, nothing unusual. At least that's what she thought. She approached the gate counter, passport in one hand, boarding pass in the other. The line crawled forward, 3 people ahead, 2, 1. Then she stepped up. The gate agent didn't look up at first. Thin glasses, bored expression, tapping keyboard. Her name tag read, Karen L., Senior Gate Supervisor. Passport, Karen said flatly. Amara handed it over with a polite smile. Karen scanned it, paused, frowned, then stared at the passport photo, then at Amara, then at the screen again. "This doesn't look right," she muttered loud enough for everyone in line to hear. Amara kept her tone calm. "Can I help clarify anything?" Karen's lips tightened. "I'm going to need to verify this. Step aside." She didn't ask. She commanded. Passengers waiting in line stared, curious, whispering, some already assuming the worst. Amara stepped back. "I assure you my passport is valid. I travel frequently." Karen didn't respond. She lifted the passport like it was contaminated. Then she said the words that shifted the air around them. "People try to use fake passports all the time. I've seen this before." The room quieted. Amara blinked once. "Excuse me?" Karen waved her off. "You people always have a story." "I know what I'm doing." "You people." A couple in line looked uncomfortable. A man smirked. Someone pulled out their phone to record. Amara's voice lowered, controlled but firm. "Ma'am, I am a federal—" Karen cut her off. "You're not a federal anything until I say you get on this plane." Then, before anyone could react, Karen held Amara's passport up and tore it straight down the middle. Gasps shot through the passengers. A child jerked around. A woman screamed, "Oh my God!" A man whispered, "She can't do that." Amara stared at the shredded blue booklet in disbelief. Her heart didn't just drop. It locked in place like gravity had doubled. "That passport is federal property," she said, voice low with shock. Karen rolled her eyes. "It was clearly fake." "Now it can't be used. You destroyed it, in front of witnesses. You're not boarding today," Karen snapped. "Security will be here in a minute for you." The line behind them erupted. Some defending Amara, others siding with Karen, but everyone watching. A young girl tugged her mother's sleeve and whispered, "Why did she do that to the lady?" The mother didn't answer. Amara inhaled slowly, hands trembling, not from fear, but from the magnitude of what had just happened. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't threaten. She just said one sentence quietly, like an earthquake no one realized was beginning. "You have no idea who I am," Karen smirked. "Oh, I know exactly what you are." Amara's eyes changed. The stillness behind them turned sharp, steel beneath silk. A TSA officer approached. "What's going on here?" Karen pointed dramatically toward Amara. "She tried to board with a fraudulent passport. I confiscated it." The TSA officer looked at the ripped federal passport, then at Amara, then at Karen. "You confiscated it by tearing it in half?" Karen shrugged. "It was fake." The officer's brows shot up, and for the first time, Karen looked nervous, barely. Amara reached into her tote, slowly, deliberately, and pulled out a second badge. Black, glossy, marked with a gold eagle. "When I tell you who I am," she said softly, "you will wish you had never laid a hand on me." Karen scoffed. "What, an influencer? A YouTuber? I don't care who you—" But the TSA officer's eyes widened. He didn't need her to open it. He knew that badge when he saw it. He stepped back immediately. "Ma'am, I need to call my supervisor." Passengers gasped again. Karen turned, confused. "What? What is it?" Amara finally opened the badge. The crest glimmered. Federal Aviation Authority, Chief Inspector Level 7 clearance, the highest rank a civilian could hold in U.S. aviation enforcement. Karen's face instantly drained of color. "You destroyed a federal officer's passport," Amara said, calm like a storm before it breaks, "on federal property, with witnesses, and you made racially targeted statements while doing it." Someone in the crowd muttered, "She's done." Phones were up everywhere now, Karen stuttered. I didn't know." Amara didn't blink. That was the problem. She stepped closer, voice quiet, but slicing through the air. "You thought you could treat me like I was nobody. But I am the person who decides whether your airline ever flies again." Karen's mouth fell open. She tried to speak, but no words came out. TSA officers were now gathering. 2 airline managers were rushing over. Someone whispered, "She's the FAA inspector? That means she outranks everyone here." Amara wasn't smiling. Her voice didn't rise. She simply said, "You are about to learn what accountability feels like." And then, another voice cut in from behind, deep and urgent. "Dr. Ellison, ma'am, please step with us. The director is on the phone. He wants to speak with you immediately." Karen froze. Director, as in director of the FAA. Everything in the terminal shifted, like the scene itself held its breath. Amara walked forward, leaving behind the ripped passport on the counter. But before she was out of earshot, she looked back once, not with anger, but with the kind of memory you save for later. "This isn't over." Karen's knees buckled slightly. The crowd parted for Amara like water, and as she disappeared into the terminal office, one question hung in the air, electric and inevitable. What happens when the most powerful woman in aviation decides to fight back? The call. The door to the private terminal office shut behind Amara, cutting her off from the murmurs, staring eyes, and buzzing cell phones still trying to capture the chaos she left behind. The room was quiet, beige, sterile. 1 desk, 2 chairs, a landline phone already blinking with an incoming call. 2 TSA supervisors stood inside, along with an airline operations manager who looked like he had aged 10 years in the last 10 minutes. "Dr. Ellison," the senior TSA agent said, his voice lower now, reverent even. "The FAA director is on hold. He, asked to speak with you directly." Amara nodded once. She didn't rush. She didn't reassure anyone. She simply walked to the desk and picked up the receiver. "This is Ellison." The voice on the other end was unmistakable, deep, commanding, yet laced with something few ever heard in public. Concern. "Amara, tell me it's not true." She inhaled, not shaky, controlled. "It's true. A gate agent destroyed your passport? In public?" "Yes." "On what grounds?" She claimed it was fake, then added, "You people always have a story." Silence. Dead. Pulsing silence. Then, "Do we have witnesses?" "Dozens. And video." Another pause. Then the director's voice hardened. "Tell me the airline." "United Atlantic Air." The director blew out a slow breath. "Their CEO is going to wish he never signed that partnership contract." There was a moment, small but sharp, where the weight of what had happened settled between them. Not just racism, not just disrespect, but an attack on federal authority. A line crossed so boldly it almost felt intentional. You want me to send legal now? The director asked. No. Amara's voice was calm but edged with fire. I'll handle the initial response myself. She thought she could humiliate me because she believed I was powerless. I want her to see exactly who she tried to break. The director didn't argue. He knew her too well. You've earned the right to lead this however you see fit, he said. But just say the word and I'll bring every compliance officer in the district to that airport. I know, she said quietly. He hesitated. And Amara? Are you okay? That question, simple, human, landed differently. I will be, she said, after this is finished. When the call ended, she returned the receiver to its cradle with controlled precision. The room waited, holding its breath like she was a grenade they weren't sure was live. The airline manager finally spoke, sweating visibly. Dr. Ellison, we are deeply sorry. She cut him off. I'm not here for an apology. He swallowed. Then, what exactly are you here for? Amara turned, eyes steady. Accountability and policy review, effective immediately. The manager blinked. Policy? Review? You have an employee who believes she has the authority to destroy federal documents, who believes she can decide nationality based on appearance, who believes she can deny a passenger boarding based on personal bias, while representing your company. He had no argument. You don't just have a racist employee, Amara continued. You have a systemic failure. She believed she would be protected. She believed her actions were normal. She stepped closer. That means it's not just about her. It's about what she was taught to believe she could get away with. The room went silent again. The airline manager's voice cracked. What happens now? Amara looked at him the way a judge might look at a defendant. Now? She said. Now we begin the investigation. She reached into her tote and pulled out a thin leather folder embossed with the FAA seal. She flipped it open. Inside were inspection orders, and at the top, United Atlantic Air, Emergency Compliance Evaluation Authority Level, Federal, Immediate Execution. The manager's face blanched. You're grounding us? For now, Amara said, until the investigation is complete. But we have flights scheduled. You also have a federal officer whose passport your agent destroyed. If you think the FAA is going to prioritize your on-time departures over federal law, you don't understand how deeply you've stepped into the fire. The man fell silent. The TSA supervisor swallowed hard. Dr. Ellison, do you want us to detain the gate agent? A charged pause. Amara didn't answer right away, because the truth was, she wasn't done with Karen, not even close. No, she said finally. She'll stay right where she is. The agent frowned. You want her to keep working the gate? I want her to be exactly where she was when this started, because I'm not finished with her yet. The airline manager exhaled shakily. Dr. Ellison, I assure you she will be terminated immediately. We'll take swift action. No, he froze. No one fires her yet. Why not? The manager whispered. Because people need to see the consequences, she said. Her, the passengers, the staff, the internet, your executives, everyone. If you fire her quietly, this becomes a PR cleanup. She leaned in. I'm not interested in a cleanup. I'm interested in correction. The room fell still. Then the agent from TSA finally asked the question everyone was afraid to. So, what do you want to do? Amara didn't hesitate. I'm going back out there. The terminal was louder now. Word had spread fast. Passengers stood in clusters, whispering, pointing. Phones still recording. Someone had already posted the video online. Amara could see herself on screens from 10 feet away, frozen in the moment the passport ripped. And there, still at the gate counter, was Karen, pale, hands trembling. Trying to pretend she was still doing her job, she looked up and saw Amara walking back toward her, not surrounded by guards, not escorted, just walking, confident, unshakable. Karen stepped back a little. I didn't know you were warned, Amara said quietly. Not by me, but by your own conscience. You chose to ignore it. Karen's throat bobbed. I made a mistake. No, Amara corrected. You made a decision. A mistake is unintentional. You looked at me, made an assumption, and acted on it. You tore a passport, then called it fake. You said you people. That wasn't a mistake. That was who you are when you think no one can stop you. Karen's voice cracked. I'm not racist. You don't have to call yourself one for it to be true. The passengers watching went silent. Even the children sensed something important was happening, something bigger than a flight, a delay, or an argument. Karen's breath hitched. Please. I can lose everything. Amara looked at her not with pity, but with something sharper, recognition. You weren't afraid when you thought I was nobody, she said. You were only afraid once you realized I had power. A pause. And that, Amara said softly, is why you should never have had any. Karen's legs shook. Someone in the crowd muttered, She deserves it. Another whispered, I hope they fire her on camera. Amara heard it all. But she wasn't here for revenge. She was here for transformation, which was always messier, always. Louder, always necessary. She turned, not to leave, but to address the bystanders. What you saw today is not rare, she said, raising her voice so the rows of seats could hear. It happens every day to people without badges, without titles, without resources. They don't get justice. They don't get phone calls to the FAA director. They don't get video proof. They get humiliated, dismissed, detained, or worse. The terminal shifted. People leaned in, silent. But today, she said, you will all witness what happens when someone refuses to stay silent. She looked back at Karen. This isn't over, she repeated. But when it is, you'll understand exactly why it had to happen this way. She turned to the airline manager standing beside the crowd, frozen in dread. Gather your executives, she said. You have 1 hour. What happens in an hour? He asked weakly. Amara's eyes sharpened. In 1 hour, she said. I ground your entire fleet. Gasps exploded around them. Karen stumbled back. The manager almost collapsed. And the waiting passengers? They weren't just watching now, they were witnessing. The meeting. The private executive conference room on the upper level of the terminal was normally used for quiet corporate strategy discussions, deals, expansion plans, fleet statistics, investor notes. But today, the room felt less like a boardroom and more like a courtroom. At the head of the table sat Dr. Amara Ellison, calm, poised, silent. Across from her sat 5 of the highest-ranking executives of United Atlantic Air, Chief Operations Officer, Legal Counsel, HR Director, Head of Flight Compliance, and the Regional President. They were all pale, tense, trying and failing to look composed. The airline manager who had escorted Amara earlier stood off to the side, looking like a man who had just watched an avalanche start. No CEO. Not yet. Just a speakerphone in the center of the table, line open, waiting. The COO cleared his throat first. Dr. Ellison, before anything else, we want to assure you that United Atlantic Air does not... Amara raised one hand. He froze mid-sentence. This isn't a conversation about what you claim to stand for, she said evenly. This is about what your employees are empowered to do when they think no one is watching. Silence, Amara reached into her bag and placed the 2 torn halves of her passport on the table. Legal counsel winced like it was a crime scene. HR swallowed hard. The regional president leaned back, hands on his head like he was on the verge of fainting. The destruction of a federal passport, Amara said, is a Class E felony. You are aware of that, yes? The legal counsel nodded, voice trembling. Yes, ma'am. Good, then we can proceed. She opened the FAA inspection folder and slid documents across the table. Your airline is now under emergency federal review. All operations will be paused in... She checked her watch. 43 minutes. The COO choked. You can't ground an entire airline over one employee's actions. Amara looked at him like he had just confirmed his own guilt. You think this is about one employee? No one answered. She continued. Your gate agent destroyed a legal document. She racially profiled a passenger. She refused to verify information through proper channels. She made discriminatory comments with confidence. And most importantly, she believed she would face no consequences. She leaned forward. That doesn't happen by accident. That happens in a culture. The words landed like hammers. HR director spoke, voice trembling. We'll terminate her immediately. This behavior is unacceptable. Amara didn't blink. You still don't understand. The room waited, tense, frozen. Firing her does nothing if the system that made her feel powerful remains intact, she said. That's like mopping a floor while the pipe is still leaking. Legal counsel exhaled slowly. What exactly are you requiring? Amara opened a second folder. Mandatory anti-bias retraining for all frontline employees. Mandatory federal compliance training for all managers. Recertification of passport handling procedure for all gate agents. Plus a full audit of your discrimination complaint. Records for the past 5 years. Submitted directly to my office. The executives looked like they'd been hit by lightning. That level of reform takes months, maybe a year, the regional president sputtered. Yes, Amara replied. That's what it looks like when you fix something for real instead of covering it up. For a moment, no one spoke. Then the COO, the only one still trying to maintain his illusion of control, leaned forward. With respect, Dr. Ellison, if you follow through with a full shutdown, you're not just punishing the airline. You're punishing passengers, families, businesses, thousands of workers who had nothing to do with this. Amara looked at him the way a surgeon might look at someone. Complaining about an operation hurting. Accountability isn't supposed to be convenient, she said. If it were easy, you'd have done it already. The phone in the middle of the table beeped. The CEO was finally on the call. Dr. Ellison? His voice came through. Smooth, rehearsed. This is Marcus Holloway, CEO of United Atlantic. I've been briefed. Let me begin by saying, this is a devastating misunderstanding and we want to correct it immediately. Good, Amara said. Then I assume you're calling to accept the compliance terms. The CEO hesitated. I'd like to request time to review what's been proposed. You have 37 minutes, Amara said. The CEO's tone shifted. This is a multi-billion-dollar operation you're threatening, and you're a federally licensed entity, she cut in. You operate because we allow you to, and we can stop you when you violate federal law. You don't negotiate with me. You comply or you shut down. Silence. A full 10 seconds. Then, what would it take to avoid a grounding today? The CEO asked carefully. Amara waited. The room held its breath. Then she said, an admission of wrongdoing. Public. Not internal. Not employee acted outside policy. Acknowledgement of racial misconduct. Immediate suspension of the employee. Immediate execution of federal training requirements. Signed agreement to full policy overhaul. And if we refuse? The CEO asked. Amara stood. You don't have that option. She gathered her documents. The COO looked sick. The HR director was crying without sound. Legal counsel was frantically writing. Dr. Ellison, please, the regional president pleaded. If we comply, will you not ground us? Amara paused at the door. I'm not here to destroy your airline, she said. I'm here to stop it from destroying people who don't have the power to fight back. The door opened. But just before she stepped out, someone stood, the head of flight compliance. A man who'd been silent the entire time. Dr. Ellison, if you walk out, the shutdown starts? Yes. And if we sign the reforms, now, before you leave? Amara turned slightly. Then the shutdown will be suspended. He looked around the table. Then he said, I vote we sign, one by one. Hands went up, reluctant, ashamed, but raised. Even the COO. The CEO's voice came through speaker, defeated. Fine. Draft the agreement. We comply. Amara nodded once. Good. She stepped out. The executives sagged like they'd just survived a hurricane. But Amara, she wasn't done. Downstairs, the passengers were waiting. Karen was waiting. The world was already watching, and the next move wasn't going to happen behind closed doors. Because justice, real justice, doesn't happen in silence. It happens where everyone can see it. The terminal doors slid open as Amara walked back into the public space. Hundreds of eyes turned. Phones rose. A woman whispered, "That's her, man muttered. She shut them down. And Karen was still at the counter, still shaking, still waiting for the rest of her world to fall apart. Amara stopped in front of her. Everything went still. "I just spoke with your executives," Amara said. Karen swallowed hard. Am I fired?" "No," Amara said softly. "You're not fired yet." The room froze. Karen blinked. "What?" "You're not fired yet," Amara repeated. "Because before we talk about your job, we're going to talk about your accountability." Karen's breath caught. "What? What does that mean?" Amara stepped closer. "It means your apology won't be whispered in a back office." She pointed to the crowd. "It's going to be said right here, to every face you looked past, to every witness who saw what you believed you could do without consequences." Karen's lips trembled. I can't." "You will," Amara said, "or the FAA won't be the only one taking you to court." Karen's knees almost gave out, and then Amara added quietly, "And when you apologize, make sure you understand the difference between regret and remorse." The crowd was silent. The moment was set, and the apology, the one the world was waiting to hear, was about to begin. The apology that wasn't enough. The terminal was too quiet, unnaturally quiet, like the air itself was holding its breath. Every seat, every walkway, every open space was filled with people watching the same moment unfold. Phones were held up like a sea of tiny glowing witnesses. The incident had already hit social media. Hashtags were blooming. Passport Gate, Drellison, Grounded for Justice. But the world hadn't seen anything yet. Karen stood behind the gate counter, shaking so visibly, the paper in her hands fluttered like a weak flag. She had been given one chance, not to save her job, not to avoid federal charges, but to face the truth, publicly. Without hiding behind policies, excuses, or "I didn't mean to." Amara stood a few feet away, not beside her, not behind her, in front of her, turned partially toward the crowd, so every witness knew this wasn't just a private HR moment. "This is your moment," Amara said quietly. "Not to fix everything, not to erase what you did, but to tell the truth." Karen nodded, tears already forming. She tried to speak once. Nothing came out. She swallowed, tried again. I want to apologize," she began, her voice trembling. "To Dr. Ellison, and to everyone who saw what I did." A few people lowered their phones, watching her more closely. I destroyed her passport. I said things I shouldn't have. Things that were wrong. I shouldn't have assumed anything about her. I shouldn't have treated her like that. I was stressed. I was tired. Amara's voice cut in. Cool. Anchored. "Stop." Karen froze. "No excuses," Amara said. "Try again." The crowd murmured. Someone whispered, "She's making her own apology get audited." Karen stared at the floor. Then she looked up again, breathing hard. "I wasn't stressed," she said, voice cracking. "I wasn't tired. I was prejudiced. I saw her and I judged her. I assumed she was lying. I assumed her passport was fake because of the way she looked." A ripple moved through the crowd. A woman near the back whispered, "Finally," Karen continued, voice shaking hard now. "I said you people, as if she was less than me. I tore her passport because I thought I could get away with it. I didn't think there would be consequences. I thought nothing would happen to me." She swallowed. "I was wrong." She looked at Amara directly. "I am sorry. Not because I got caught, but because I finally see what I am, and what I've done to others without ever being held accountable." Silence. A dangerous, emotional silence. Amara nodded once, but she didn't speak. Karen breathed out like she'd been underwater and finally surfaced. The apology was over, but the justice wasn't. Before the crowd could react, a man stepped forward, a passenger, mid-40s, holding the hand of a young girl. He spoke gently, not to Karen, but to his daughter. "You see," he said softly, "that's why we speak up. Because silence is how people get away with things." The girl nodded slowly. Another voice called out from the waiting area. "Are they really grounding the airline?" "Yes," someone else answered. "The FAA shut them down for investigation." "That's what power looks like," an older woman whispered. "Not revenge. Correction." Amara finally stepped forward, addressing the room, not Karen. "What happened today was not rare," she said. "It was just recorded." A wave of truth passed through the space. Even the people who had never faced discrimination before felt the weight of it. She continued, "The only difference between today and every other day this happens is that I had a badge. I had authority. I had a platform." Her voice didn't shake. "But millions of people don't, and when they speak up, nothing changes. That is why what happens next matters more than what happened today." All eyes were locked on her. "Injustice doesn't start with violence," she said. "It starts with assumptions, with disrespect, with someone believing they can take something from another human being, dignity, safety, identity, and walk away untouched." She looked at the executives now lining the back wall. "And the people in power don't get to fix it with a statement and a press release." The COO shifted uncomfortably. Amara turned back to the crowd. "This airline will not fly again until it proves it can treat human beings like human beings. That is now federal law. And for the record," she turned slightly toward Karen, "accountability is not the end of a life. It is the beginning of a new one." Karen's face crumpled. Not in a performative way, not in self-defense, but in the kind of grief that comes from realizing who you've been. But before anyone could take in a breath of softened air, a voice shouted from near the terminal entrance, "The press is here!" A flood of reporters rushed in, cameras, microphones, flashes. The story was already viral, but now the world was arriving for the live version. Someone yelled, "Dr. Ellison, is it true the FAA grounded the airline?" Another shouted, "Are you suing?" A third, "Do you believe racism is systemic in aviation?" The questions came rapid fire, hungry. Amara didn't answer. Not yet. Because now, the fight wasn't just against one gate agent. It was about to be against an entire industry. Karen, hearing the reporters, looked terrified. The executives looked worse, and the CEO, still on speakerphone, finally spoke with panic. "Dr. Ellison, we need to discuss media strategy before this goes national." Amara gave a short laugh. "Before?" she repeated. "You're already trending in 12 countries." The room erupted in camera flashes, and then Amara did something no one expected. She walked toward the press. Not away. She stepped into the center of the camera lights like someone who understood her voice was no longer confined to a badge or a boardroom. She paused, then said, "My name is Dr. Amara Ellison. I am the Chief Inspector of the FAA, and I am here today because power was abused in plain sight. And for once, the person who experienced it wasn't invisible." The crowd roared in shock and applause. Reporters shouted over each other, and Karen, realizing the size of what she'd unleashed, covered her face with shaking hands. But the cameras didn't stay on Karen. They stayed on Amara. And Amara wasn't finished. She pointed directly at the reporters. "You want the real headline?" she said. Every microphone lifted. The system didn't fail. It did exactly what it was built to do. And now we are going to break it and build something better. Gasps, cheers, applause, shock. Somewhere online, the video clipped itself, auto-captioned, and hit 1 million views within minutes. But the story wasn't done, because justice may have begun, but consequences hadn't even started. The sky belongs to all of us. The press conference wasn't planned. It wasn't staged. It wasn't scripted. It was raw, unscheduled, and unforgettable. Exactly the kind of moment history likes to keep. Reporters pushed forward, microphones raised high, cameras live streaming to millions. And at the center, illuminated not by stage lights but by truth itself, stood Dr. Amara Ellison. She wasn't angry. She wasn't emotional. She was precise. The way a pilot is precise before takeoff. Millions of people fly every year, she said into the cluster of microphones. But only a certain kind of person is treated like they belong in the sky. Everyone else is treated like a suspect, a threat, a problem. She let that land. No employee destroys a passport unless they believe the world will excuse them. No system produces that behavior accidentally. It's taught, it's protected, it's repeated. The camera zoomed in, and then she gave them something bigger than a headline. She gave them a movement. Today, one airline has been grounded. But today is not about one airline. It is about the entire culture of aviation and how it treats the people it depends on. Reporters were now practically climbing over one another. Dr. Ellison, are you saying racism is industry-wide? Are you going after other airlines next? Is the FAA officially launching a systemic investigation? Amara didn't flinch. Yes. That one word sent the reporters into chaos. Karen, still standing at the gate counter, closed her eyes. She hadn't just destroyed a passport, she had ignited a national investigation. The executives upstairs, listening through a screen, looked hollow. And the CEO? He called back. Not once. Not twice. 6 times. Amara ignored every call. Because for once, the CEO wasn't in charge. The truth was, hours later, the video had crossed 62 million. Views. Airline stock prices were dropping. Airline unions were calling emergency. Meetings aviation schools were rewriting their ethics manuals. Hashtags weren't just trending, they were mobilizing. Passengers are not threats. Grounded until equal. Let us fly. Free celebrities spoke out. Pilots spoke out. Flight attendants spoke out. Black travelers shared their stories, thousands of them. Stories of humiliation, suspicion, detainment, dismissals, fear. And in the middle of the storm, the FAA issued a formal public statement. Effective immediately. The FAA is launching a full-scale national investigation into discriminatory practices within U.S. aviation. Dr. Amara Ellison will lead the review. No one had ever seen anything like it. And Amara, she didn't disappear after the press. She worked in conference rooms, in policy meetings, with lawmakers, with activists, with victims, and eventually with Karen. The meeting. No one expected it. Took weeks, not days, before Amara met with Karen again. Not in a terminal, not in front of cameras, in a small, quiet conference room at the FAA headquarters. Karen walked in slowly, escorted by legal counsel. She looked smaller now, not in size, but in certainty. She didn't speak. She didn't sit. Amara did. She waited a full 10 seconds before saying anything. Then, "You requested this meeting." "Why?" Karen swallowed. "Because I want to understand how to make this right." Amara shook her head slightly. "You want forgiveness." "That's different." Karen blinked back tears. "I've lost my job. I've lost my career. I can't go anywhere without people recognizing me. I can't even look at myself anymore." "That's not accountability," Amara said. "That's consequence. One is active. One is passive." Karen exhaled shakily. "Then tell me what accountability looks like." "You want the real answer?" Amara asked. "Yes. It looks like this. You spend the rest of your life making sure no one else goes through what you caused. Not because it's required. Because it's right." Karen nodded slowly. "I can do that. I want to do that." Amara studied her. "You don't earn redemption by being sorry," she said. "You earn it by being useful." Karen nodded again, this time with a strange peace, and Amara, unexpectedly, extended a paper across the table. A program name sat at the top. Aviation Fairness Initiative, Anti-Bias Task Unit. Program Advisor Karen Loudon, former gate agent. Karen looked up, stunned. You're offering me a place in the reform team? No, Amara said. I'm offering you a chance to prove your apology wasn't a performance. Karen's voice cracked. Thank you. I won't waste it. Amara didn't smile. She just nodded once, because justice isn't about liking people, it's about changing them. Months later, the Airline was flying again, but under the most aggressive federal compliance program in history, all airlines now had to retrain every gate agent in federal passport handling, record and report all detainment incidents involving passengers of color, create non-retaliatory complaint channels for discrimination claims, install FAA ombudsman stations in major terminals, submit to yearly civil rights audits, and Karen, she wasn't a gate agent anymore. She was standing in front of a classroom of new aviation employees, teaching them the rules she never knew. You don't have the right to decide who belongs. You have the responsibility to treat everyone like they do. Some people rolled their eyes, some listened, some truly heard. And that was enough. Reform is never instant, but it is possible. And what about Amara? She never sought fame, but she became a symbol. She never wanted applause, but she earned respect. She didn't fight for herself. She fought for every person who had ever been told you don't belong here, in the sky, in a room, in a system. And when she gave her closing speech to the FAA committee, her final words weren't angry. They were a promise. Air travel was built on the idea that the sky belongs to all of us. That freedom of movement is a right, not a privilege. That dignity is not optional. So long as I am here and long after I am gone, that truth will remain. The room stood, not in ceremony, in gratitude, because she hadn't just rewritten aviation policy. She had rewritten what power looks like, not force, not control, but responsibility to the people who have none. A little girl, no more than 8, sat in an airplane seat, staring at the window like it held magic. Across from her sat her mother. The little girl whispered, "Mom, can anyone really fly?" Her mother smiled. Now they can. And far beyond the clouds, where the world looks small and the sky looks endless, justice finally had altitude.